The clatter of silverware against porcelain is usually the sound of comfort, the symphony of a family bonded by blood, tradition, and shared history. In the prestigious neighborhood of Oak Ridge, these sounds were as common as the evening breeze. But on the night of November 14th, that rhythm was shattered by a sound that didn't belong in a dining room. Not the sound of laughter, not the pop of a champagne cork, but the wet, heavy thud of a body hitting hardwood. Imagine a table set for six, the aroma of slow-roasted chicken and rosemary still wafting through the air, expensive red wine breathing in crystal decanters, and the warm glow of candlelight flickering against the mahogany walls. Now imagine that same room 10 minutes later. The candles have burned down to jagged stubs, the wine is spilled like a crimson lake across the pristine white linen, and the only person left at the table is staring into space with eyes that will never see another sunrise. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This wasn't a random act of violence by a passing stranger or a desperate intruder. This was a calculated, cold-blooded execution performed between the appetizer and the main course. Tonight, on Dark Case Files, we go inside the impenetrable walls of the Miller estate to uncover how a celebration of life became a blueprint for a massacre. This is the story of a dinner where the deadliest ingredient wasn't in the food. It was sitting right next to you. To understand the carnage, we must first understand the architecture of the family that lived within these walls. The Millers were the undisputed crown jewels of Oak Ridge, a gated community where the grass is always perfectly manicured and the secrets are buried deeper than the swimming pools. Arthur Miller, a self-made real estate tycoon, was a man of iron will. He didn't just walk into a room, he occupied it. He was rigid, disciplined, and expected nothing less than absolute perfection from his kin. To Arthur, his family was an extension of his balance sheet. They had to be flawless, or they were liabilities. Beside him sat his wife, Eleanor. To the outside world, she was the epitome of grace, the host of a dozen charities, always wearing a smile as polished as her pearls. But behind closed doors, that grace was a brittle mask for the bruises, both literal and metaphorical, left by a lifetime of keeping up appearances. Eleanor was a woman who had learned to be silent, to be invisible when Arthur's temper flared. Then there were the children, the heirs to a fortune built on steel and shadow. Julian, the eldest, was the heir apparent to the Miller empire. He had the looks, the education, and the pedigree. Yet he carried a secret that was eating him alive. A crippling gambling debt to the kind of people who don't care about family names, only results. Clara, the younger sister, was the rebel. She had escaped the golden cage by moving to Europe, only to return weeks before the incident with a mysterious fiancé named Marcus. Marcus was a man with a charming smile and eyes that never quite mirrored his warmth, a man whom Arthur openly despised and had privately investigated. The air in the Miller dining room on that final night was unfilled with the warmth of a homecoming. It was thick with resentment, unspoken grievances, and the suffocating pressure of Arthur's expectations. On this particular evening, the family had gathered to celebrate Arthur's 60th birthday. It should have been a milestone of achievement. Instead, it was a gathering of ghosts. Witnesses, the neighbors who heard the muffled shouts, and the catering staff who left just an hour prior described the mood as electrically charged. One server later told police that the silence in the room was so heavy it felt like it was pressing against the windows. The house itself was a fortress, equipped with state-of-the-art security, motion sensors, and thick oak doors that muffled any sound from reaching the street. This meant that whatever happened inside was meant only for the ears of those present. There were no signs of forced entry. No broken windows, no picked locks. The monster didn't climb through a basement window in the dead of night. The monster was invited to dinner, offered a vintage Cabernet, and given a seat at the head of the table. As the clock struck 8 p.m., the first course was served. Arthur had just made a toast, raising his glass to loyalty, a word that must have tasted like ash in the mouths of his children. Within 30 minutes, the house would go dark. A sudden power failure, later found to be a manual sabotage of the main breaker, plunged the estate into a terrifying absolute blackness. When the lights flickered back on 10 minutes later, the legacy of the Miller family was written in blood on the silk wallpaper. The transition from a luxury dinner to a crime scene happened with surgical precision. According to the forensic reconstruction, the attack began the moment the room went dark. Arthur Miller was found slumped in his chair, his throat cut with such force and anatomical knowledge that he was nearly decapitated. He hadn't even had the chance to stand up. Eleanor was found in the kitchen, her hands clutching a cordless phone she never got to dial, her life extinguished by a single, precise strike. Julian was discovered in the grand hallway, trailing a path of blood as if he had tried to crawl toward the massive front door, his fingers scratching at the wood in his final moments. The brutality was intensely personal. There were no bullet wounds, no echoes of gunfire to alert the neighbors. Only the cold, silent efficiency of a blade. The killer knew the layout of the house. They knew where the cameras had blind spots. They knew exactly when the staff would be out of sight and when the security system would be most vulnerable. But the most chilling detail discovered by the first responders wasn't the bodies. It was the state of the table. Analysis of the scene showed that after the murders were committed, after the blood had begun to pool on the floor, someone had sat back down at the table. They had finished their glass of wine. A single plate remained clean, and a single chair was pushed back neatly, as if the guest had simply decided they were full and it was time to leave. This level of psychopathic calm sent shivers through the investigative team. When the police arrived at 9:15 p.m., following an anonymous 911 call that lasted only 3 seconds, they found a house that looked like a temple of death. The silence was absolute. Detective Sarah Vance, a veteran of the force who had seen the worst of humanity, noted that the killer left a signature of arrogance. There were no fingerprints on the glasses, no DNA that didn't belong to the family members, and the murder weapon, likely a high-grade tactical knife, was nowhere to be found. The initial list of suspects was short and devastating. Everyone who was at that table. Julian had the motive of a massive inheritance that would immediately clear his debts and save him from the underworld figures hounding him. Clara had the motive of a lifetime of revenge for the emotional and physical abuse Arthur had inflicted upon her and her mother. Tonight, we delve into a story that seems ripped from a mystery novel. On a crisp autumn morning, the sprawling estate of billionaire industrialist Alistair Blackwood became a crime scene. Alistair, the patriarch of a powerful and seemingly perfect family, was found dead in his study. The initial report suggested a heart attack, a tragic but natural end for a man of his age. But one detail didn't add up: a small, almost imperceptible puncture mark on his neck. As investigators peeled back the layers of the Blackwood family's pristine public image, a much darker reality emerged. Alistair was a tyrant, ruling his family and his business with an iron fist. His wife, Eleanor, lived in a gilded cage, trapped by his wealth and influence. His eldest son, Julian, was drowning in debt after a series of failed business ventures that his father refused to bail him out of. And his daughter Clara had been secretly disinherited after defying her father's wishes one too many times. Suddenly, everyone was a suspect. The motive wasn't just money. It was freedom. Detectives found that Eleanor had been researching rare, untraceable poisons online. Julian's phone records showed a frantic call to a known loan shark just hours before his father's death. And Clara, the quietest of them all, had a surprising secret of her own: a passionate affair with the family's young, ambitious doctor who just happened to visit Alistair on the night he died. The case became a media circus. Each family member had a plausible motive and a shaky alibi. The police were baffled. Was it the scorned wife, the desperate son, or the disinherited daughter? Or was there another player in this deadly game? The autopsy report came back, and the results were shocking. The poison identified was a complex cocktail, one that required specialized knowledge to create and administer without leaving a trace. This pointed the finger directly at the family doctor, Clara's lover. But as the police closed in on the doctor, he vanished. A note was left behind, a confession taking full responsibility for Alistair's murder, claiming he did it for love, to free Clara from her father's control. It seemed like an open and shut case. The fugitive doctor was the killer, and the family were merely victims of their patriarch's tyranny. The world moved on, and the Blackwood name slowly faded from the headlines. But the lead detective could never shake the feeling that something was wrong. The confession was too neat, too perfect. Years later, A chance discovery in an old case file brought him back to the Blackwood mystery. He found a detail everyone had missed: a financial record showing a massive, anonymous transfer into the doctor's offshore account, made the day after he disappeared. The money was traced back through a labyrinth of shell corporations, leading to an unexpected source: Eleanor Blackwood. The quiet, long-suffering wife had orchestrated everything. She used her knowledge from her online research to guide the doctor, manipulated her daughter's affair to create a perfect scapegoat, and used the family fortune to pay for his silence and disappearance. She played the part of the grieving widow perfectly, while secretly pulling all the strings. Eleanor Blackwood got away with the perfect crime, inheriting her husband's empire and finally gaining the freedom she craved. The truth was far more chilling than the fiction everyone believed. What do you think? Was this justice or the ultimate betrayal? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable true stories.